special called session of the Board of Trustees of the Spring Independent School District is officially called to order on October 21st, 2023, and the time is now 9:01 p.m. Board of Trustees present are Trustee Adams, Trustee Correa, Trustee Durant, Trustee Jensen, and Trustee McDaniel. I would like to ask everyone to turn off or silence any of their electronic devices. Our first item on this morning's agenda is legislative and advocacy priorities for Spring ISD, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to Dr. Deborah Jensen.
Thank you, President Durant. I would like to hand out some sheets of paper that I've been preparing for myself as I've been doing advocacy, and also papers that I have been sharing within the governance committee where we did not have a quorum, and today we have a quorum, so this is a public meeting as we discuss these things.
And so just as a point of housekeeping, while we are required to record these meetings and we want to make sure that we do have a good audio recording of these, if no trustees are joining us remotely, then you do not have to remain on camera the entire time, and presentations can be made while you are off camera. We just want to make sure we continue to have that audio recording. Also, please know we are not streaming this out. We are using Zoom for the purpose of the recording, and also in case a trustee needed to join remotely, but this is not being streamed to the web at this time.
I don't see anyone else on.
No, I don't see anyone join remotely. And for ease of administration, I'll keep an eye on that. So if I see them join, I'll let you know. That way you're not having to constantly check. You can be into the work.
Okay. All right. The first sheet you see from Deborah L. Jensen, Spring ISD resident and taxpayer. I have been contacting people in our community, not as a board member, but I wanted you to be aware of what I am sending out. I will tell you that sometimes it's hard to email someone, even real estate agents. I have to go into their websites, and sometimes I have to put in text. I can't copy and paste. Also, sometimes you can't do attachments. So, as I go one by one, I have to, whatever I can do to communicate to them. And I am contacting you to warn you about a danger to our home values and the well-being of our Spring community. I am a Spring Independent School District trustee, but I am writing this message to you as a private citizen, a homeowner, and a taxpayer. And this is when I go into how we had a B rating last year. We have actually done better this year. We have 2 high schools, and cited by the newest U.S. News and World Report as the top high schools in the nation. And yet we are now faced with maybe getting a C or a D because of post hoc evaluation of our performance. So I go through that. Yes.
Can I please ask your apologies because I went out of order
Okay.
in the agenda today. We were supposed to start with budget.
I thought I was second. That's why it was all over the table there.
No, that is my error.
Okay, do you want to just stop me right here?
Yes, we're
Okay.
going to table it to later on without any objections from any of my other colleagues. All right, and we're going to go ahead and start this morning's agenda with our budget item, and I'll turn it over to Ann Westbrook. Did you want to go? Ms. McDaniel, do you want to go first?
Kind of talking to myself. I can go, and then maybe it will probably make, I don't know. we'll go with it.
Yeah, if Ms. McDaniel goes first and we get the foundation and theory, and then we can see what the district has been working on, and then come
How
back
they
together
intersect.
and how they intersect.
Okay. It's okay. So we're looking at the document. There's one that has a colorful header with the timeline for known budget cutting decisions at the top. Is the first packet, has a blue header rather.
I'm sorry. Now I'm confused. The agenda at my seat has advocacy priorities and budget discussion is the agenda items. It doesn't have anything for,
This is budget.
this is, but, okay, thank you.
So, a known timeline for budget decisions is the first packet, and then there is a presentation that the wonderful Mike is pulling up for us, that accompanies it. That's the one where you see it says Wild Ride Ahead Workshop. I'm a pause.
President Durant, I just want some clarity. When I'm looking at the agenda, it says 1, call to order, 2, advocacy priorities. So we're now discussing advocacy priorities.
Yes. Without any objections from my colleagues, so that our guests can leave early, I would like to move the budget discussion ahead of the advocacy priorities.
Okay.
Okay? Sorry, I confused everybody.
Fine by
What's
me.
that change? I thought I
Okay.
communicated it in the email I sent everyone, but, okay, all right.
You ready?
You can
Okay.
continue.
All right, we're ready, reset. So, just an acknowledgement that the information shared from Economics Lab comes from their lab, Georgetown University. They do allow for sharing of their materials with attribution, so that's their credit. Also, I'm not an expert, I'm more so a facilitator of this information. Had the opportunity to go to a 4-part training from Economics Lab, and so this is a portion of the information relayed. And the purpose is to prepare school districts nationwide for our upcoming, as we call it, ESSER Cliff. So starting, they have 5 documents, and they're calling them the Take 5 documents. So the purpose is, these are information and resources that can really help keep to keep in the forefront as we have budget decisions moving forward. So the first resource is a timeline. So looking at September when school started, everybody on that first page, there's a little visual of the money trickling out of the faucet. And so that just indicates this is our final year with ESSER. And so we are here October to November time, and we're having our first budget workshop where we are going to set our priorities. If you take a look at the bottom, there's just some little reminders. And for the sake of time, we won't necessarily fill in the blanks, but probably once our CFO, Ms. Westbrooks, comes in, we can help fill in some of those blanks as we walk through. So just getting sort of a baseline of where do we start the year with our funds. Even at the bottom one, looking at academics, compared to pre-pandemic, students are blank in math, blank in reading to tie in the academic piece. If you're looking under December, where it says narrow timeline, so right now, that's where we are, fall, winter. When districts and communities can collect input and engage on meaningful options for cutting or investing. So the purpose here is to highlight, now is the time for us to really be talking to our community so that they are aware of what's to come and communicating that we are seeking input. We're not making decisions right now, but we are seeking input. and ensuring that we give responses. And yes, please jump in.
I was
as
going to
throughout.
ask, would it be appropriate to have that as one of our, when we have the board meeting, talking with the public that we have coming up, to include that?
I would think so, that this would be the time when we start to, one note that they said was that even with the heads up, there will be a jolt. So giving as much time as we can and giving front loading as much as possible is going to really help our community. Thank you.
So that building bridges with the board is on October 30th, I believe. And that would be absolutely perfect, Dr. Jensen. Any concerns with that from anyone else? All right.
Yes. All right. Moving into spring, we will have another budget work session where we are able to quantify and narrow options. Real quick, if you look at the top as well, there's a couple notes for the finance team. So the finance team at this point is working on budget trade-offs. We have another document that I really love that we'll look at it a little bit later, but that's going to help us to determine quantifying different options and trade-offs. But if you look down at the bottom, trying to stay in order, there's a lot of information on here. But looking back to March, where we narrow our options, examine equity implications. I don't know if, and someone could answer this, how they have on the bottom, many locales have a March deadline for notifying staff of layoffs. If it came to that, do we know what our date would be? And maybe we don't know it right now.
It's always, I'm going to look to Jeremy, because we do have a 45-day notice that we need to give our employees. In the olden days, we used to be told, April 1st, that you notify employees if their positions are being cut. What's that date now, Jeremy?
So remind me of the I'm sorry, I was looking at the
It's okay.
technology stuff.
Just a deadline if we had to get to a point where we needed to notify folks of staff of layoffs. Is there a
So
cutoff?
for end of year, we really have to give them 10 instructional days notice.
Okay.
Or 10 days before the last instructional day. And so
Okay.
generally the May board meeting is usually the last meeting that the board has to be able to approve any non-renewals or probationary contract terminations for the end of the year.
Would that include if we are eliminating specific positions? Do we have until May, or is that an earlier deadline? I'm making it up. We're eliminating all first grade teachers.
It should not be an earlier deadline. That would still be our 10 days before the last instructional day deadline. There might actually be some shorter deadlines for RIFs mid-year. And we can certainly look into that a little bit deeper, but it's certainly not a longer deadline.
And one of the things to take note of for Edunomics is because they are looking at national data, like this might be sort of their earliest worst case for some location across the country. So
Right.
it'll be state specific.
Right, and that's why I wanted to bring it in now so we can put it in context for ours. So with our context, we have 10 instructional days. The May board meeting would be the last possible approval. Perfect. Thanks, Jeremy. And then looking at June, that would be our final board vote for our 2024 budget. And then at the bottom, just a note, input at this time is generally too late. And so other than canceling planned cuts or draining reserves, which we don't want to do. So they're actually calling, go ahead.
Just to add, on the timeline here, when we were talking about the communications with the community, the previous Edunomics course gave us two good templates, one for the principals to use for their staffs in the schools, and then one that we could use for the community as well.
Yes, and I just resent an updated communication template. Everybody should have gotten as well. Thank you, Trustee Correa. Look into September 2024, they're calling it the little, dramatic language, but they're pretty much saying it's going to be, this is the most funds that districts have received, some districts ever. And so, it's going to be a very drastic situation. And so most school districts, next year, our budget is definitely going to be leaner than it is this school year. So that's just the timeline. The purpose is just to clarify the process, keep us on track and aware of the deadlines that are coming up, record our priorities, and then just a reminder to engage with our communities. And they did mention it's not uncommon for the clock to run out on leaders as we prepare for budget. So what we're doing right now is perfect in alignment with what they recommend.
I would just point out that there is not an exact parallel, but in 2011, when we had the dramatic funding cut, that was, I think, much more severe than this is going to be.
Okay.
But I would
us.
expect there were probably some good lessons learned from that experience that could be applied to what we're about to go through.
Yeah, and to that point, is there a way for us to kind of do just a short summary of kind of what worked and what didn't work at that time versus how it compares to what we're doing this year?
Mhm.
Maybe something to consider.
Mhm.
I was gonna, oh, go ahead.
Justine and I can give you feedback on that.
And if I may provide too a little bit more clarity on I call it RIF, it's reduction in force. And so while May is our deadline to notify employees, we have learned in the past and in other RIF situations, the more notice we can give employees, the better. And certainly there is a process that goes into that. So the board should not be voting in May necessarily we're going to close these programs and do these things, because what will happen is you will decide to shut down a program or to close a program or you reduce the workforce in some way. And then if the entire group of titles are not affected, HR then has to go in and go through a certain procedure to objectively and equitably determine who those individuals are that may stay or may go. And so really by March, probably at the latest, the board should be considering those programs that would be closed if that's the case. And honestly, the sooner the better, so that employees who are going have an opportunity to find other work and kind of know what's happening.
I also like to add that definitely Dr. Jensen and I can bring forward some lessons learned, but I'd also like for our CFO to bring her thoughts from 2011 as well when we have that conversation.
Another quote that resonated that was shared was in kind of like a common phrase, I guess, is never waste a good crisis. And so they were saying, you've heard it before. So they were saying, since we are having to make such drastic changes, this is a great time for us to think about how we can solve problems differently and maybe restructure things, with what's best for our kids at this time. So never waste a good crisis. All right. Any other thoughts or questions about the timeline? There's 5, so I'm just going to kind of move us through. All right.
I just want to make a quick comment that Chief Westbrooks, since she has been CFO, has put us in a much better position than we were in 2011. Okay.
All right. So the second resource in the Take 5 set is called Key Finance Figures. There's no page numbers, but it is page, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It would be number 6. And it is a landscape, like a chart. Key Finance Figures. Oh, is it? Oh, perfect. Yes, because I edited the document. Okay, perfect. So it's on page 2 for you. So this is, let me jump back. So the purpose of this sheet is just to call attention to any potentially out of whack spending, and can help us to counter any inaccurate narratives around our district. It can help ground our decisions in our local context. So what are the real facts about Spring ISD? And it helps. They also mentioned that when you cite figures, it builds trust in the community as well. So using actual numbers and statistics make us more credible in the public's eyes. So looking at the first piece, so number 1 and 2, when it comes to, oh, forgot about that. Okay, there we go. Yes, so row number 1 and 2 is about our students. Just another note, they recommended us talk a lot about our kids. We know, and I know for myself, we talk a lot about teachers, teacher advocate. At the end of the day, our focus is on students. So every like fourth sentence, make sure that we're bringing up students and how this correlates to and connects to our kids. For number 1 and 2, an important highlight is that enrollment drives our funding. And so if we're shrinking, then we should be downsizing. They said ignoring this is at your peril. So just something to keep note of. I'm gonna just jump around to different pieces. Number 4, total expenditures per pupil. This is something that we have been slowly but surely shifting towards to keep things relative. It's gonna help us to, when people hear all these big figures, the number almost is just very abstract. So the more that we can talk per pupil, the more we're able to see how much value we're really getting out of certain programs and different expenditures. And so how much money do we spend per student? Mention this constantly. Number 5, special education costs was an area that they talked about using a critical eye to determine our spending. If we're spending more than 13 to 14% on average, this bad spending deserves some attention.
And it just occurred to me that in this season, when we're talking about vouchers, and the figure I commonly hear is $9,000 per voucher, $9,000 to $10,000.
They're still with the 8,000.
Oh, it is
They
8,000.
I haven't seen a change in the number. I know,
It was okay. All right, I could have that wrong, but I say that to say that that's what they're proposing is a subsidy for students. And when we talk about our per pupil spending for each expenditure, that gives people some context when they hear a figure like $8,000. We can say with each program, with each staff member, how much of that is a part of. I think our figure for what we spend is something around $15,000.
I think in that report that
Okay,
Ms.
yeah, I'm-
Westbrook's just passed out.
Okay, so like that just gives some context that like education cost is not free. And so giving raises to teachers and purchasing programs cost.
On the side of the correlation of our conversation from the budget as to where we are from a legislative perspective right now, and even when she said, make sure your focus is always on kids, we need to look at the bill on how we're funded now, or how they take the snapshot as opposed to attendance and enrollment.
Enrollment versus attendance.
And that's gonna be a key advocacy bill we probably want to talk about later, because that definitely drives the budget.
Absolutely. Just taking that quick note. Okay. Jumping, if you go ahead and turn the page, jumping over to number 7 with teacher salaries. Recommended that we cite these publicly, which we do, and include benefits in the discussion as well. This is a big area of misconception a lot of times. 8 and 9, these are also about FTEs. Number of students per adult on average, 8 to 12 or so. So that's what they note as average. So if our district is staff heavy, then we should say so and be transparent about that. And then the last one to highlight on this chart is number 10. And the note here was that staff prefer cash versus money spent on benefits. And so if we're spending over $25K, consider lower cost plans, but we know, yeah. So that is just consider what these figures mean for our district and just keep these at the forefront as we are moving forward.
I noticed just your number 6, because that was part of our discussion the last time, was transportation costs down at the bottom.
All right. Anything else on this piece? All right, let's move to number 3, which is staffing and enrollment graphic. This one's sideways here, but actually, no, it's okay. Because it's actually gonna be, it's okay, the PDF is sideways, but we can flip it at our seats. So if you go to, there's a page that says school spending and outcomes,
We got
and
it.
has a lot of questions, and then the second page has a graphic. And so there is a website, if you see on step 1, that we can pull up. The thing about the website, just to note, is that the data is from 2020 to 2021, so it's not the most recent data. But the purpose is, and I wonder if I could pull it up. I won't do it right now. Hold on, let me make sure I'm on the right one. All right. So this, yeah, I had the wrong one. It should be this one. Mine is out of order from yours. Sorry about that. It's the one that has like the line graph. But the plots, it basically plots the 2 most consequential figures in our district, which enrollment we know drives revenues, and then staffing drives the majority of our expenditures. What's our number? 87% staffing? No, staffing expenditures, 87% approximately. So there is a graph that we can create where we plug this information in, and it just has these questions for us to consider. If we notice that the lines, there's a diverging trend for these lines, that's going to identify whether the district has excess capacity and could downsize. And then it'll also help to highlight major budget gaps with that will impact staffing as well. So this is a great visual that we can utilize, we can share. Go ahead, Dr. Trues.
As with any graph, and we're interpreting it, over these years, we've had huge demographic changes to free reduced lunch, huge. And sometimes the student mobility has gone up, and there are reasons why we might have increased staff. So I expect some divergence there.
And that's a great point. I think just keeping an eye on it. There was a note that, the reports of teacher shortages have left the impression that districts now have a lot fewer staff. When in fact, we still see that districts are staff heavy, even with the teacher shortage. So that's the purpose of this graphic here. All right, moving on to number 4. That one, now we get to the school spending and outcomes that we were at before. And when we create the graphic, it'll look something like this, where on one axis you have the spending per school, and on the x-axis, and on the y-axis you have the student outcomes, and they utilize STAR, ELA, and math for these. And so when you go on the website, you can look at just elementaries, middle, high school, but you can look at the district as a whole, and it'll come out with a scatter plot. The color green indicates less economically disadvantaged, and the deeper red, the more students who are economically disadvantaged. And then the size of the circle is going to show the size of our district. Would I be able to pull up pull it up and then share my screen? Okay. Yeah, we looked at it in the equity committee, and again, the data is a little bit older, but just for the sake of,
Yeah, let me see. it.
for the sake of, yeah.
Okay, good.
Uh-huh. Comp Center Network.org/SSOS. Okay. And then, yeah, I'll let him share now, because then you can go home and pull it up yourself as well, and you can play with it. And it also has, go ahead.
Yeah, we can play with it.
Yeah, and it has different, thank you, sir. Minimize this piece here. All right. And so you can do different displays. So if you come over here onto the left side, you'll find Texas. Again, this is not the most updated data. This is from 2020 to 2021.
Most updated we got.
Whoops. We will get Spring ISD. And so again, Edunomics is, they go through and pull national data. So this is from our data. So as you see here, there's different comparisons that you can do. We'll go to display number 2, which is spending versus outcomes for all schools in your district. And so, let me see if I can move this. Can I make it bigger? What is it asking me? Oh, it's just telling me, yes, ma'am, you can go online. Yes, ma'am. You can go online, and it's just reminding you that this is the meets and above grade level for STAR, ELA, and math combined. So I'll close that up. All right. So you come over here, you can customize the grade band. So Trustee Adams wants to look at high school. So these are our high schools here. So again, the axis left to right, this is the spending that we're doing on schools. And then the y-axis, you can see over here, is the percentages. And so, for example, quadrant
Can
1,
we read what's at the top there?
yeah,
Okay.
quadrant 1, these schools spend more public dollars than their peers and have higher student outcomes. We don't really have any up there. Over here in this quadrant, these schools spend fewer public dollars than their peers and have higher student outcomes. So here, who is that?
And that's Winchie over there, probably.
Winchie.
Yep.
And Spring Early College, just like you all predicted.
We spend less money and have.
Spend less money, have higher outcomes. Yep.
And then who
Then when
said-
we get down here to quadrant 3, these schools spend fewer public dollars than their peers and have lower student outcomes. This is Decaney. These schools in quadrant 4 spend more public dollars than their peers and have lower student outcomes. So down here, Westfield, and over here, kind of on the line, Spring High School. So again, just to remind, the color is going to show economically disadvantaged, the size. Let's see, since we're here, let's look at elementary.
Can I put some context on this data?
Yes.
On this, this was the first year out of
Right.
the pandemic.
Mhm.
And I can tell you, for example, at Spring High School, that was Miss Melendez. And we also remember, because I know she was very clear on this, this was the 2021 school year. We gave the STAR exam. However, the students were not required to take it. So they didn't all come to school to take it. So that, did yours come? Did not come. So see, you could have given us a point there for Westfield.
Yes. And
So just for us, as we're looking at this data, I know so all the kids did not come. I know at Spring High School, we had like 700 kids in the main campus and like 300 in the other campus. So that's one thing. Now, also remember, for early college and Winchie, the students apply for that program. The students are selected, and it's a rigorous process. So no discipline, no attendance, passing all STAR exams, you know, passing your performance, passing an interview. So it is a very selective process for Winchie and Early College versus what we see at Spring, Westfield, and Decaney. Just some context to the
Yes.
data there.
And I appreciate that. And that is important to bring into the discussion. The purpose is more so to see we always talk about return on investment. And I see y'all's mics are on, so I'll pause.
Well, I mean, and there's that equity piece, but you're right. Like there are some different circumstances. I think we account for those. I mean, what was most interesting to me about that data was that lower half with our comprehensive schools and like what we're doing. And the other thing I think that's powerful about this is if we don't have to wait for Georgetown to compile this data
Right.
nationwide, right? We can have somebody in our research division or whatever we call it compiling this data in as close to real time as we get, given the lag from the state in getting the data back. And so we can be a bit more proactive in terms of compiling this data, creating these scatter plots, and really closely examining what we're doing budget-wise.
I think you're
Trustee Correa?
absolutely right.
Okay.
We'll get that data because we have for sure the 2022 is clean data. The 2023 is still, you know, they're still deciding the cut points. But for the 2022, we can certainly get that, and we've got the expenditures. Stop.
Yeah, and I was just gonna make the point, two things. I wanted to see what the previous year was, like, 19 to 20.
Oh, it only has
It didn't have it, right?
That was my
Okay.
question, how far
Yeah.
back it goes.
I couldn't
Okay.
remember. And then the other thing was, on the flip side, looking at these schools, we do have, not only to use this to see, you know, where we can cut and kind of where our opportunities are, but we've got some schools that are outliers
Mm-hmm.
that are doing really well, and so that can help us to say, okay, well, what are they doing? Why is it working?
Just like less money, higher outcomes. We have Robertson
Ponderosa
up
was
there.
one.
I just had a question.
Uh-huh.
When you do these scatter plots, you're comparing them to a general population of schools in Texas?
So I think this is based on stars.
Mm-hmm. This is STAR, ELA, and math.
So it's
State.
yeah, comparison to.
Okay. When I've done exploratory statistics with Spring ISD data, I usually pick a group of districts to compare it to that are larger urban
Mhm.
types and have a similar population to try to figure out.
And you could do
sometimes
that
these
too.
trends.
You
So
can come
I'm
over here.
I'm just saying, it does make a difference with what you're referencing.
When I looked at this, I looked at Aldine, and I did the same thing. I looked at their high schools, and they have a few more high schools, but they have some similar designs. They have a CTE academy, they have an early college, and we compare favorably to Aldine, at least in this particular year that there was. And so, like, but you're right, Debbie, that is something that we can do. We can go around, so we don't have to stay just regional to Harris County. We can go around the state and look at similarly sized, similarly populated schools and see what we look like. So.
Mm-hmm.
So when we conduct any kind of analysis, when you're looking at data and you're doing your analysis, of course, we have to bring in all of our factors that will impact that. And in looking at everything that comes in, that gives us an opportunity to see where there's actionable outcomes, where we can really, you know, make a difference. So I think it's fantastic. This is great.
I'd like to emphasize what you just said, because that is not a trivial comment you just made, but that you have to figure out the system and how you think which factors are going to
Exactly.
be salient, really something you need to pay attention to.
Thank y'all. And then, you know, just when you get a chance, there's more questions there. Does anything surprise or concern you? Are there any schools that it makes sense to protect from deeper cuts? Which ones? And so that's the purpose of this chart. All right.
And I
And
did want to add to the conversation, in the first Edgenomics course, one of the things that they had brought out was looking at the outcomes per pupil, the spending per pupil across the schools. You know, they also had given an example of you know, when this happens, or if your district is on the defense, when seniority drives up money at some schools, when you've got special programs that are costly, lower need schools get less money, and then school size is a factor, or schools with declining enrollment have high costs. So it kind of gave an outline of when this happens, this is how the district leaders can engage to address those pieces.
And thank you for mentioning that, because before we move, I'll just show really quickly, you can change the display. So if you look at display number, we're on 2, which compares the outcomes, but number 1, you can look at spending across schools. And so again, we know this is 2020 and 2021, but it will line up, and you could do, just like you said, you can just look at individual high schools. Ritchie Academy, whew, shoots up. So, yeah. I'll leave that there. All right. We can dive into that a little more later. So, yeah.
We opened it, the intention was for it to go 5 years and then bring, that in-house, so.
That's also reflecting that there are fewer schools or fewer students.
Students. Right.
So-
Yes, taking that into consideration as well.
Things we
Okay.
have to bring in, yeah.
You want to jump back? Yes. Thank you, sir. All right. So, but just know that that is there as well if you want to explore that. And last but not least is my favorite resource, which is number 5, the grid. So if you go to that last page that has the grid on the top, this is filled out for an imaginary school district. Let's see if it's gonna be sideways, but it's okay. Look something like this. So if you look at the purpose of this grid is to take stock of our investments, to focus our attention on the intended effects for each investment on our students, and then weigh alternatives in terms of cost and value. So if you look across the top, you'll identify what the investment is, the major cost factors, approximately how many students are served from that investment. Then it gets into that cost per student we've been talking about, noting the desired outcome. So how effective has it been? They go high, medium, low, just to be able to quantify it in some way. The risks that are associated with the investment, and then check data for desired outcomes. So they filled in just some examples here, but we have a blank chart on the back where we can fill in with the investments that we have. And so that can help us to, kind of compare apples to apples. And again, take some of those figures. When we talk about 1.3 million, we may say, oh yeah, we're putting this towards tutoring. Okay, how effective has it really been? How much are we actually spending per student? And it will help to bring clarity around a lot of our investments.
And this actually goes in line with that session that we took, the academic ROI, because it had talked about, what learning increased, the number of students helped, and then the estimated dollars spent. That's like the top 3 questions we should always ask when we're looking at the programs and the academic ROI.
Mm-hmm. And so the activity that we did was to take this example and say, which interventions would you decide to keep or cut with this information, and breaking it down more holistically. So that is, I know we've been doing some work like that. I know we had a presentation earlier in the year with the principals, and they gave us some recommendations. So this could be something that could just add more context to that discussion. And that is the Edunomics Lab Take 5 resources for us.
I want to thank you, Trustee McDaniel, and the whole committee for bringing this forward to the district. I think it's a lot of information that'll give us an opportunity to digest and process it. And when we come back together in the second workshop that it recommends from a budget perspective, we're getting started earlier this year for the community, because we know with the ESSER funds going away, we're going to have to make some tough decisions. So I like this. And so at this time, I'd like to go ahead and turn our next conversation over to our Chief Financial Officer, Ann Westbrook.
Good morning. Thank you, President Durant. So you all have a folder at your seats. And so everything that we have here is going to be a look back at what we've done, what we've discussed, and then just discuss where we are and what we're doing right now in preparation for bringing forward some recommendations to the board in January. So the first item you have is the adopted budget, the budget that was approved by the board in June for 23-24. And so as you can see, we did begin our budget reductions in 23-24. So $9.2 million in budget reductions have already been included in this year's budget. And that left us with a just under $25.4 million budget deficit before the use of ESSER funds that we're addressing now, so that we're prepared going into our 24-25 school year. And we're going into that school year with all intents of being in a balanced budget. So there's some other supporting documents. Again, no new documents. They're all documents that we've seen and we've discussed throughout our budget discussions over the last year or so. So bringing the preliminary budget back was just as a reminder of where we are, our starting point, that $25.4 million deficit. We know we're utilizing the final year of ESSER dollars. We're utilizing $22.3 million to bring us down to what we hope will be only a hit to fund balance in 23-24 of $3 million. So you have also a list of the budget reductions. It's titled Budget Reductions Included. And so that is that list of $9.2 million of what was approved as part of the budget for 23-24. So just a reminder of what has already taken place. And you also have the ESSER 3 year 3 budget that was approved. And this is a good way of looking at it to know what's going away. And so this is a conversation that we're having with our principals, with our staff right now, and just reminding everyone that we're in that final year and that all of the resources that we've had that have been on top of our general fund budget, all those resources are sunsetting because the funding source is going away. And so you can see if you're on the ESSER 3, year 3 proposed budget list, we've been supplanting. We've been using ESSER 3 to offset our general fund budget. And in this year, 23-24, we're looking at $22.3 million being used to offset our general fund budget. If you just go down the list, our elementary campuses have all had 2 additional math interventionists using the ESSER funds. And so those positions, again, ESSER funded, those positions, we wouldn't have a funding source for those. Every campus received an additional FTE through ESSER. And so we called it an ESSER teacher because we funded it at a teacher level. But each campus has been using that position differently depending on what their needs are. Our elementaries also each have an additional reading interventionist position. We've talked a lot about Kelly Services. We know Kelly Services is sunsetting at the end of January. So those dollars will go back into the ESSER budget and we'll make sure that we're fully utilizing them before the end of this year. So Kelly Services is something we've already discussed quite a bit. Community and schools. So that's the program that allowed the district to have an additional counselor at secondary. So we used it at our middle schools and at our high schools. They have additional counselors through the Community and Schools program. Middle schools have a math interventionist position that's been added through these ESSER funds. The SEL, the social emotional learning curriculum for middle and high school secondary, is $183,000. That's paid here. APEX is the intervention tool that we've been using to prepare our students for college readiness and for interventions. That's funded here. Education Galaxy and Liftoff and Dr. Hinojosa so you may have to help me with that one. I can't remember exactly if it's interventions as well.
Yes, it's interventions at the elementary level.
Okay, thank you. Reading diagnostic, that's a portion of the MAP program that we funded through ESSER, the elementary SEL curriculum, the Summer Teacher Institute. We've attributed some funds, or we've contributed some funds from ESSER to pay for the speakers and some of the professional development at the Summer Teacher Institute. We hired an additional human resources recruiter. We started off with a out of the country recruiter that was helping us bring in bilingual teachers, and then we ended up with a regular recruiter that's just housed in our human resources department. And also we allocated funds for the Harris County Department of Ed Grow Your Own program that we've paid for through ESSER. So wanted to take a moment and walk through each one of these so that it's clear that this is not a part of the $25.4 million deficit. This is resources that we've had above and beyond that are being 100% funded out of ESSER that we didn't have in our general fund budget. These were on top additional resources that we're sunsetting. What I want to be very clear on is that with our principals, every year since the very first year that we had ESSER funding, we have had the discussion with our principals. These are additional positions. They're above and beyond. They will go away at the end of the ESSER funding. So make plans for holding on to a vacancy. Make plans for how you're going to fill that hole when those dollars are going away. So for our principals that have been with us through this pandemic, we've had that conversation each and every year. And each year those principals come in and they have their plan. This is what I plan to do. So now we're reminding them we're in the third and final year. And so now it's time to execute those plans.
So all of these will go away unless we make some other kind of provisions or.
Right. And again, everything that's listed here is above and beyond the $25.4 million deficit. So it's not like, oh, we cut these things and that clears our deficit. These are above in addition to the deficit amount. So yes, they will go away.
If these don't go away, then this,
Then we'd be looking at a
Really?
$50 million deficit.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So the third list that's
Can
in-
we see this next time? Like at the current, and then what it looks like with these included?
Which the one you're holding up? What are you looking
I'm sorry. So I'm looking at the
So it's a different
23,
funding
24
source.
preliminary budget.
Mhm.
Right.
You're saying see the general fund preliminary budget with the ESSER cost included?
Right, so that we can see this truly, it could be as high as 50.
Well, but they're two different funding sources.
And that's
So
true.
the preliminary budget that's on here, this is our general fund.
This is us.
Right, and this is actually a federal fund that is
I get it.
completely
I
separate.
get it.
Right, and so that's why I wanted to just make sure to separate the
I
two.
understand why you
Mhm.
separate.
at? I think,
Does everybody get what that means?
yeah, I understand.
Okay,
that.
all
I
right.
understand. I think the question we had been pondering, and this is becoming more and more real the closer the train gets, was amongst the things that we spent ESSER funds on, was there any program or intervention where we got really good bang for our buck, right? That would be worth, even at the cost, like we should keep that because this many kids got this much academic benefit from it. And that, I don't see that here. And I don't know if we've, calculated that, but to me, if we spent all this money and didn't really like get much out of it in terms of outcomes for students, then the whole thing can go away as far as I'm concerned. So
Well, I want to,
That would be sad too, that we
that
didn't,
would be
we didn't capitalize on the funding that we have. That I would hate. I would hope that this contributed to the beat. I would hope that this is what is helping us to see greater outcomes. What I'm looking at, and I've got to go back and process through our edunomics and see if we can't look across the board at these as well as our existing um, vendors and tools and curriculums and systems that we use and get down to that cost per student and the outcome and really take a look at, what's not working for us in the past, what can go away, and does that leave room to keep some of what we saw some greater outcomes from. And I think that's the work that I hope that we will do well in advance so that we can make data-driven, outcome-specific, informed decisions around the budget.
Yeah, and that goes back to the academic ROI.
That's what I'm getting at.
Mhm.
We need to do a deep dive in the academic ROI across the board.
And so Ms. Westbrook's will go through the committee that's working through this process. And I can tell you, Mr. Adams, first, and I think Dr. Jensen, you brought it up, the work with that we've been doing. And so we've seen great gains in the 2022 STAR results in the 2023, even though, they may all be washed out with this accountability system, we had great gains. Just looking at these and from the discussions and the little bit of data that we've already started analyzing, we know that the APEX is something that has been really strong at our secondary campuses, and they're analyzing it now, the committee is. And this Education Galaxy / Liftoff is the elementaries, and they've seen also good usage and good results. But this is preliminary. The committee is in the process of analyzing all that. And you are right, Ms. Durant. I know when we were in closed session last week, when we talked about these meetings, I said, this is it. Because this is $50 million that we don't have in our budget. And if we don't do, Spring ISD will look different next year based on what we are facing now. But Ms. Westbrooks will go through the committee and tell us what they're doing.
And so Dr. Hinojosa asked me to share a tool that we were in. I don't know how well you all can probably see it pretty well from your seats, maybe not so much up there. But so we're a part of the System of Great Schools, and we work with that entity to walk us through. And ESSER, of course, is a big topic because we're not unique in any way when it comes down to the budget deficit and the issues that we're dealing with. And so what we worked with ERS, and this was just last week when we were at the Holsworth Center with System of Great Schools, and it's System of Great Schools, but ERS is a component, it's Education Resource System that's a part of that as well. And so this is the tool that they gave us. And so to Ms. Durant's point, to President Durant's point, is we're looking at the ESSER investments and then saying, okay, did we get the bang for the buck with those ESSER investments? But then also, what's the impact on the budget? Because we know we're over budget. And so you're looking at it twofold. So we know we need to decrease the budget, but we're also analyzing each of the ESSER investments to determine whether or not we need to keep that investment. But it's a trade-off, because if you're keeping that investment, then something else has to go. And to your point, maybe something that we're paying for with ESSER is actually yielding greater results than something that we've been funding out of our general fund. And then there's that trade-off. So something that's really exciting that we just got with our technology team is we have a new software now that is tracking all of our software programs across the entire district. It's tracking the usage, it's tracking the per student cost, and so it's able to give us that return on investment report, because it could be something that we're saying is so phenomenal, and then this report says that no one's using it. And so that data, coupled with the discussions that we're having right now, is helping us figure out where those trade-offs are, so that we are only holding on to and funding and using this crisis to our benefit to figure out what works best for us. So that's the process that we're going through right now. So yes, it's not just it's gone because ESSER funding is gone, but it's the potential for that trade-off.
And what's the name of the software?
It's a Google Doc that was created through System of Great Schools.
Okay.
And so this is actually it's a Google Doc.
Can I ask for this, this chart, how is data, the outcomes being included? Because I know it has, you said y'all were talking about if it has a bang for our buck or not.
And so that's where we'll use like the software that I mentioned, our technology software, to give us the data on the usage. And we can couple that with the outcomes, the student outcomes, to see whether or not we're getting the return that we're
Got
anticipating.
it. So it's
Okay.
not on this chart, you're going to then
Right.
see the correlation.
And
Okay.
But
so
we
this
can-
chart is the Google Doc.
It is, but
And
we
what's
can,
the technology software?
the name of the technology software.
I think it was like Lightspeed.
Yes, Lightspeed.
I wanted,
Okay, and what was the cost on it? Did it come through on our,
Technology actually had
Or
the funds
co-op, or
within
was-
their budget. They had funds within their budget to pay for it. And if it was over 50,000, it would have come on the co-op, but it was less than $50,000. So they paid for it out of their existing budget.
can I add, I guess a comment as well? The same thing that we're doing with, or what we're discussing about doing with the proposed budget cuts, and getting our bang for our buck for these programs. The proposed budget reductions that we're also looking at as far as within our general scope in these positions. I would assume we did the same thing, or if not, could we do the same thing? For one, the same reason is to make sure that whatever we're cutting is not a position that, we need to keep. And the other request is, I noticed that there were some proposed budget cuts of items that were already going to be cut or already cutting. And so when we look at some of these cuts, are we including additional long-term expenses, or are we including in the budget cuts? I mean, it makes sense to include things in the budget reduction, things that are just automatically going away for whatever reason. But that piece, that line item goes away for the next time that we're looking at budget cuts. And so what are we filling in to replace that? Because it's not a long-term expense, I guess. Does that make sense?
I'm not 100% following you.
I
So
got
you
it.
said there's some things that are listed in the budget reduction that we already cut?
So for example, Naviance.
Yes.
We were already in the works to eliminate that because we're replacing it with a new system. So that's not a continuing long-term cut that was going to save us
one time?
money over the next few years because it was already going away this year.
Are you looking at the 24-25 proposed budget reductions?
Yes.
So since the board has not approved those, we're still considering those proposed budget reductions. And so this list was provided, and I'll show you since I have the screen up.
The only reason I bring that up, it comes back to looking at those items in the same way that we're looking at the budget reductions that were included, and in the same way that we're looking at the proposed budget cuts here with the ESSER funds, that we're looking at our return on investment for all of those areas and not just, one time. Because it's easy to say, okay, we're going to reduce our budget and include this line item because it was already going away this way, but there wouldn't have been a long-term impact looking at it for the next season because it wasn't it was stopping anyway.
Right.
And we replaced it with something.
Right.
So what is really the same?
Right.
We replaced, I'm sorry, I want to make sure I'm staying with you all because I don't ever want to walk away from this meeting and you're thinking one thing and I'm thinking something else. So when you say we've already replaced it with something else, so it's not really a savings. What is that?
So didn't we have a new software system that we were replacing from Naviance, or Naviance was just going away? Using this as an example.
Yes, so Aries, which is the new student information system that we're implementing right now, has the capability to do some of the things that Naviance is doing for us.
Right.
And so we're replacing our student information system that already has that component. So it doesn't negate the savings from Naviance. We're just able to get it from something that's already being paid for.
Right,
Yes.
right. Which is good.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess, am I making sense? So my point is, when we're looking at any proposed budget cut, if we're looking, are we,
As you talk through, tell us which one you're referencing.
yeah, that Naviance was the one that kind of stood out because it was a line item that was already gonna go away. Because
Well, it wasn't
it
going to
was
go away.
proposed.
We were proposing it to you. So
But-
on
right.
this right here, we're proposing it. You have not approved it yet. So our
Right.
proposal is, let's make it go away because for the last 7 years, we've been paying 166,000 or whatever it was for the last 7 years. So we're proposing that this go away. And Aries is coming in, but Aries is really getting rid of eSchool, right? So Aries is replacing this and it has a function that will support Naviance. So our proposal to you, we haven't done anything that's on here. This is just what the committee proposed last year.
Right, right. And I understand that these are just proposals, but I guess what I'm trying to say is looking at these long-term, I would hope that we're not looking at proposing budget reduction items that that would not have had a long-term effect. And so, getting into that thinking, okay, well, we're gonna cut 166,000 and that's gonna be $166,000 savings. Well, yes and no. We're not,
Is there
Are you
no,
talking
is there,
long-term, one-time costs
yes.
versus year over year?
So that could be the confusion, because yes, it is a long-term savings, because that 166,000 we were spending on Naviance, we will no longer spend.
True.
Because now what we were spending is we were paying for eSchool.
Mhm.
And instead of eSchool, now we're paying for Aries. Well, the money that we had budgeted for eSchool is what's paying for Aries. Aries just happens to have something
That
that allows
component.
us to sunset Naviance. So that truly is a savings because we won't pay that portion for Naviance.
Mhm.
there's,
Only, I'm sorry,
there's no extra cost associated with adding that functionality to Aries?
it's just a
Came
part
with
of
it.
the
It's just part
software
of it, okay.
system,
Yeah.
yes. What we're funding right now is the implementation of Aries. So that's one-time cost.
We got rid of eSchool and we picked up Aries.
Yes,
Aries also has the capability to do the same thing we were doing with Naviance.
yes. So that's
And so
getting
that's
rid
a
of
year over year
duplicate.
cost savings
Yes.
because it's 166 year over year.
Mhm.
But to trustee Correa's point, are all of these year over year or are some of these one-time cost savings?
No, they're
that's what I
annual
was-
cost savings.
Yeah.
And so this proposed list, we're still considering it proposed because if you'll recall, there's things on this list that the board did not necessarily agree with when we brought them forward. So we put this as a resource for our budget committee this year that just started in October. And so they're looking at this list, they have this as a resource. And I will tell you, many of the things that are on here, they have put back on the budget reduction list to bring forward to the board because these weren't approved.
Right, right. And I know that these are just proposed. It was just in context.
I understand what you're
So,
saying now.
yeah, I don't want
Yes.
to, because this is a public conversation and I don't want
Yes.
people to think, oh, well, we got rid of that, so we're going to be saving this money if it was a one-time reduction
Yes.
that was about to happen anyway.
I hear you.
Or as an example,
what she was
if
going.
it's a position
That's what she
that
Mhm.
somebody has left the district and it was a high-cost position, and that's included in the budget cuts, but that's not necessarily a long-term expense because we may or may not rehire for that spot. And so just
Yeah.
visually seeing it on paper, you think, oh, it's a great savings, but maybe it wasn't because it was something that was already happening anyway. That's
Kind of like the reduction of the area soups. We went down, but we actually had people, it was actually accomplished through attrition.
right.
Right.
That's where she's going.
But that's still a
definitely-
savings.
So,
Definitely accomplished through
No, no.
attrition, but
It
it
is- yeah.
is year over year savings,
Mhm.
right? So we are making, when we, so for example, the assistant superintendent reduction, we've gone from 6 to 4. And that is definitely a year over year because absolutely, I would tell you, anyone would love to have less schools to supervise. So it is a big budget reduction year over year that we are experiencing. The great thing was that we've been able to do it through attrition in just the right time, having the right conversations with people. But it is a significant savings year over year.
Yeah, and I'm not negating that it's a savings, because it is. It's just, I just want to make sure that we're clear how we present this, that we don't have somebody fall into that trap thinking that it was this huge.
May I bring
just
up another point on this? I looked at these ESSER fund expenditures as recovery. And we know that the reading and math scores went down nationwide, and that our kids needed extra tutoring and extra help to recover. And we know that reading is recovering, but math doesn't seem to be recovering as quickly. So this is something that was needed because of the pandemic and shouldn't be needed going forward at this level. We're still going to need it, obviously, but not at this level. The other thing is, when I look at this kind of infrastructure we had to add to our school district to try to reduce infectious disease spread, I'm assuming some of that is under the supplant expenditures, just the structures we've had to put up. And it looks like going forward, we're not out of the pandemics worldwide or nationwide or Texas-wide. So I'm not going to belabor this, but at least it's built and we don't have to buy more this year and more this year. The other thing is the one-to-one with the Chromebooks. I think that's something we really needed in our district, but I guess it took us a pandemic to really have to, rationalize and justify the expenditure for getting those going. But now hopefully we're getting at a maintenance level on that. So I think there's all kinds of expenditures on this list, but some of them really were pandemic related, and the pandemic is at least at a substance. I guess it's getting to be like the yearly flu, as I understand.
Point well taken, Ms. Correa, about making sure that it is true savings. And that's a discussion, because we, in these budget staffing committees, and we just had our first budget reduction committee last Monday, we on the finance side have to drive everyone away from the philosophy and get to the budget line item. And that's what I tell them. If I cannot find that line item in our budget, it's not a budget reduction. So I 100% understand where you're coming from. We want to make sure that it's truly a cost savings that we can see, and it's not just a theory. Right, I understand that.
Can I just add in, I don't want to necessarily tamper with the System of Great Schools document, but if we could have clear connection between the investment and the data or the desired outcome, I think that would be really helpful.
We can
I
totally
had a
tamper.
couple, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just saying we can totally tamper. So they give
Okay.
it to us, right? So
For
we
us
can
to-
adjust it
okay.
however it works best for you all. So we can add a column, we can
perfect.
add data. I'm sorry, Ms. President Durant.
So we can, because I was going to kind of wrap us up so we could have at least 45 minutes for advocacy. But when we looked at the tool for Edgeonomics, we were able to delineate and actually understand that it was being compared to STAR, ESL, and the three elements. From here, I don't see, what this is all comparing, the systems of great schools. So it's a little different. I think we probably need to think through which tool will work best for us, or do we really do both? Or merge them together. But I think that's where we go as next steps in our next conversation. I think today was to get a clear understanding of what, what the district, where they're headed and what we want to propose. One of the things that, though, kept hitting me through the conversation is we were talking about a lot of the committee work. I think as a board, we'd like to maybe have a little more line of sight, a little more granular into what they're looking at, what they're bringing forward and proposing to us. Because when it gets to us, we're saying this is what we're proposing. But in looking at Systems of Great Schools and what you presented, Ms. Westbrooks, it's a lot going into how they're coming to those decisions. And if we can better understand the how, we can collaborate more on the why. Does that make
So
sense?
if you're okay with me just having a moment to get a point of clarification, because we are in the midst of the work and we have begun those committees. We had our first meeting October 16th. We have another one scheduled November 7th, I believe, or November 13th, and then December 7th. And their charge, and so this committee is made up of 46 individuals. It includes principals, it includes teachers, assistant principals. We have central office people, and we're working on it from the angle of central office, elementary, secondary, and then enrollment in ADA. So those are our 4 big components, and that's the work that we're doing. So what their goal is, what we will accomplish is before we leave for the holiday break in December, we will have our list of proposed budget reductions to bring forward to the board in January, because the timing is so critical this year, because we need to get our master schedules done. Our principals need to know what their staffing is going to be, ideally in February, March being the absolute latest, so that they can plan and really be ready for 24-25. And we did not accomplish that last year, and it hurt us. So first of all, we were coming out of the bond in November, and we were bonding all the way until February last year. So what happened is we had our meetings with our principals, we set their staffing, and then we continued to have those budget reduction. And as Trustee McDaniel said, the clock ran out on us last year. And so decisions were not officially made about the budget reductions really until June 27th. And so the principals were scrambling to now adjust to the new staffing because we didn't have clarity. We don't want that to happen this year. So we're bringing forth reduction proposals from this committee in January, and really and truly asking the board to make decisions in either January or February so we can move forward and have our budget set aside. So that's why today I wanted to make sure that we know exactly what you want to see so that we can bring forward what you need to see, so as not to delay that process once we get into the spring semester.
100%. I think we're all definitely on the same page. But what I would like to see, and I'd ask my colleagues to speak up, I don't want to see a list of the committees recommending these proposed cuts. I want to know how we got there. What was the data? What went into that decision? Were comparisons done to alternative options? How did we get there? I want to know the how. I can't give you a decision. I think that's why we ended up with so many questions when it came forward, and it got delayed because we had to keep meeting again because we kept asking for more data, more data, more data. Maybe we could eliminate some of that if we know the how, what the committee looked at, what was all included in how we got to what the final recommendation was. I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah, and I'll just add that communication template that was sent out, and we can share that as well. When it comes to budgeting and trade-offs, some of the languages, we are considering reducing blank in order to blank for these students because we're finding why.
And so I think economics is the board's attempt to say to administration, we want to know the how. We want to see it. We want to understand it so that we are making the best decisions.
So that when we do have to make those statements in places like building bridges with the board, we have the support to cite to. I think these are going to be tough conversations for the community, and I need to be able to explain myself when I'm addressing the community.
So just to clarify, Ms. Westbrooks, you're saying in terms of like that document, you need to know what we want to see on that document today so you can move forward?
Yes, because I don't want nearly 50 people working extremely hard, and they're working in the evenings and they're meeting in between, only to come before the board. Because remember, the committee is the one coming before the board, and they're giving you their rationale. When they're sitting in front of you, those were your principals talking to you, saying, these are the decisions we made and why. So I want to make sure that that committee has the right charge. And so they know what data you want to see, so that we ensure that when they come in front of you, that data is brought forward to you. Because they're not making, and that's what the principals kept saying, we're not making these decisions lightly. They're living on these campuses, and they know, what this entails when they're bringing that reduction forward. So when you say the data, so for example, we brought forth as a proposed recommendation, the transportation, to decrease the transportation back to the 2 miles. And we brought forth the data that said, here's what we've seen. It didn't impact attendance, even though we thought it was going to help us impact. Like, we brought all that data forward, and it wasn't well received because we know it's something difficult. So we said, put that to the side, because we want to take this year to talk through it. So short of the data that transportation brought forward, what additional items would you want to see to be able to make that decision? Because I can tell you, it's already back on the list for the 24-25 school year. And the other thing, Mr. Binkley, I do believe that instead of having it as a component of a regular meeting, we may need to make a separate meeting just for the budget in January and possibly in February, so that it's the only thing we're discussing.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And then historically, we've called them committee of the whole meetings, COW meetings.
What about the form that Natasha was just pointing out? And I know she
Exactly.
set it out to us before. I think that is a really efficient way to state the essentials
grid?
of the decision.
We're talking about the grid?
Well, I think she's talking about the template with the communication,
Oh, the
the communication
template?
I
template
think the
that has the
communication and-
stamps.
Correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues, but I think the economic process is what we want to see.
The grid.
That's what
The
that's
grid.
And when you say grid, because it's just an Excel document, so it's
Right.
not difficult at all. We can use whatever works best for the board. So when you say grid, you're saying you want us to bring forward the budget reductions in this exact format with the exact items and headers that are on here. Because if so, then we'll recreate this and we'll start the budget committee working with that.
Also, go ahead. Oh, what was
Can
that?
we, will November 4th be sufficient time for you? We have another meeting on November 4th that
Yeah.
will give, I haven't had time to dig into the economics, and we also have 2 other colleagues that aren't here. So I don't want to say this for sure, but I know you want to have it ready for January. We do have another meeting on November 4th. Perhaps we can add budget to that agenda and come back. Our takeaway today is to come back and answer Ann Westbrook's question on how we want to see the data.
I would like that, because I think we need time.
Mhm.
I would like to make it very clear, like what we
What we want,
decide,
what
what
we
we
want.
want, this is how we want it to look, this is what's gonna help us make the decisions, and that way it's clear for the committee. Because you're right, we don't want it to be a waste of time, and not that it's a waste of time, but to be a frustrating process and still end up with the same result.
So can we have a couple weeks to answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Ms. Westbrook, was there anything you were going to go over and share with us today you did not get to because I kind of cut us off?
No, we talked about the work that the budget reduction committee is working on. I mentioned the ROI software that we now have, Lightspeed. The fact that we have 2 studies with central office staffing that we're going to bring from 2 different entities. So Texas Association of School Business Officials is looking at central office staffing, comparing us to our peers, and they're doing some trend data over the last 5 years, and they're preparing a report that we'll have available to present. We'll have it in December. We'll have it as part of the budget discussion in January.
Okay.
TASB is also doing that same study from a different angle so that you are flush with data from two separate entities that are looking at our central office staffing from two different angles. So TASB's report will not be available until March. So we'll have TASBO's in January, but we won't have TASB's until March. So TASB's will layer on top of TASBO to just give more context to central office staffing. So that's working. We know ABL, we just signed the contract with ABL, who's doing last week. So we're working on bringing an update to where we are with that. So remember, ABL is looking at master scheduling, which is the campus staffing. So we'll get those data points that will help layer on to the decisions that the budget committee is recommending as well. And the only other thing is, I know you all are following the legislative session. So Senate Bill 2, they put out theirs, and it's a $75 increase to the basic allotment, which is about $4.5 million for Spring ISD. The other proposal is $3,000 a one-time stipend for teachers for 23-24, and then to add that funding, which would be about $6.5 million to our recurring budget to sustain that $3,000 raise only for teachers going forward. So that's Senate Bill 2. House Bill 1 just came out on Thursday. It's 184 pages, but some of the highlights that we got from that one is that House Bill 1, they're proposing a $4,000 retention stipend for each employee that's on the minimum salary schedule. That is teachers, nurses, librarians, and counselors. So it's a little different than what the Senate is proposing. And then they're actually proposing an increase to the basic allotment of $30. So from $61.60 to $61.90 in 23-24, but then an increase to $6,500 in 24-25. So on the House side, if the way that they're proposing their increase to the basic allotment, it could require us to still trigger that 30% of that increase has to go towards raises. So that hasn't come out yet. So whatever that would generate, we would have to do raises out of those funds, which is a little different than what the Senate bill is doing. So we know that what actually happens could be somewhere in the middle, or it could be nothing. So we saw that happen in the regular session. But I just wanted to just kind of put on your minds what's happening from the finance standpoint in this session. And also remember, school finance is not officially on the agenda, but the committee work is happening. So we'll just stay tuned to that as it's going forward. The only thing is that I didn't say that I want to say, but I think I said it through my comments, is that we're in a time crunch right now. And so I just want to be just so clear with what you all want to see, because we want to maximize the time that we have in front of you as we walk through this budget discussion, because it is a lot of work that is having to be done. And we just want to make sure that when we get in front of you, we're bringing you what you need in order to make an informed decision, so we can make those critical decisions hopefully in January.
Can you put for us all of those data points in the board update? Because that lets us know what you're doing as we explore what we're doing. You're using Systems of Great Schools. We're looking at what TASB and TASBO is proposing. Just went through a litany of things that you're utilizing. Right.
Add that to the board update.
Yeah, so
Yes.
we'll know. Here's what she's doing, and what are we proposing different than that, or in addition to? Make sense? I know. All right. I want to try to wrap us up. If you need a break, I'm gonna ask you to go ahead and take it, but I'm not going to. We're gonna keep moving because we've gotten advocacy down to 30 minutes, and we will probably run over. Hope not, but
I'm going to talk fast.
okay. All right.
All right. Those of us who've had to run for office, we know that you look at voters in three groups. One group is always going to vote for you. One group is never going to vote for you. But then there are the voters that you actually may talk to them and you may change their opinion. I think I look at the Texas legislature the same way. But I am still trying with the ones who are not ever going to agree with me, just so that they know there's some opposition out there. We have made efforts in the past to form partnerships with other school districts so that we have a greater voice. I will tell you, I signed up for 2 meetings with other school districts, and both of them were canceled this year. So I have really had a difficult time connecting with other boards of trustees to get.
I'm gonna echo that because when I chaired that committee, every time I set up a meeting, I think we had one, and then the second one, we didn't have anybody come, and it has been hard to connect.
So I throw this out. If you know people on other boards, if you're friends with them, if you can make us have, instead of an official meeting somewhere, maybe we could, just try to have the person-to-person contact instead of a big meeting. That's all I can think of that. And the other thing is there are organizations that we could ally ourselves with. And one I like is Raise Your Hand Texas. And I know that not all the board agrees with that, but I think that they offer something that is very valuable, and that is that they're nonpartisan. They are issue oriented, and they were successful reducing the number of tests that our school children have to take. And they still have to take 20 plus tests, but at least it was a reduction, and they're still working on that. Now, so what we today are talking as a board, what can we do? I heard a story once from a legislator that he ignores the mass email identical messages. However, if he gets a penciled note on a big chief tablet, he stops everything and reads it. So I think what it is we need to each sound different and come at it from our own direction. What I've tried to provide you today is some basic information that may key you. The one thing I am concerned about, and people in our community should be concerned about, is what the accountability system would do to homeowners and our neighborhoods, our communities, if the TEA is allowed to unilaterally, post hoc, make up an accountability system that takes an improving school system and gives it a lower score. Because so many people just look at that A, B, C, D grade. And right now we got the B, and we're better, but we're faced with getting a lower score because the whole system's getting changed under our feet. So if you care about that, let your legislatures know about that. At the bottom of the page, for the letter from Deborah L. Johnson, Spring ISD resident and taxpayer, I originally said I oppose vouchers, and as Trustee Adams pointed out, that they're euphemistic things that they're calling it now. In fact, I had one legislator, when we met with them face to face, said, I'm opposed to vouchers. I guarantee you he's for student school choice, tax credits, or education spending accounts. So all of this is taking away taxpayer money and paying it to private entities. The next 2 pages that I've given you are how woefully underfunded Texas public schools are. Now, when you go on, we certainly spend more than our state allotment on per pupil spending in our district. And we're getting it from a whole lot of different sources. Now, the federal funding, grants, all kinds of things that we apply for to spend on our students. But we are way behind the USA state average in per pupil funding. The other thing was, I have this still vouchers or education spending accounts that what the Texas legislature is proposing right now is to give the education spending account folks way more money than they are allotting to Texas public school children. I downloaded one of the articles that we've been receiving in emails about 24 House Republicans defect on school choice vote. And they're the defectors I appreciate and support. But one of the interesting things in this article was that even the $8,000 that they're proposing at this point is not evenly distributed. I found out that no more than 40% of the spots will be reserved for students who receive free or reduced lunch. Only 40%. Are they helping the underprivileged or kids who can't have access to good schooling? They are not. No more than 30% for families who earn between 185% to 500% of the federal poverty line. I looked up the federal poverty line and it is about $20,000. So what we're doing is we're going to give 30% of this money to married couples who might be making close to $100,000 a year. So be aware that this money is not going to the kids who might need extra money for their schooling. It is going in a great proportion to people who do not need that money.
Dr. Jensen, could you, yeah, no, I was just
Yes.
gonna ask, could you repeat that stat one more time?
Okay,
Or is that in our,
okay, no,
Okay.
this is
Okay.
a document I downloaded, and this was from one of the, I'll send you the link to this, but this Center Square contributor, Bethany Blankley, April 7th, 2023. And this was where the title was 24 House Republicans Defect on School Choice Vote. And this is where I found out that this funding, Senate Bill 1, prioritized these things this way. And that was no more than 40% of spots reserved for students who receive free or reduced lunch. No more than 40% for them. No more than 30% for families who earn between 185% and 500% of the federal poverty line. So when I calculated 500% of the federal poverty line, it was close to $100,000 a year income. So no more than 30% is going to go to those folks. The next thing, one of my things that I am really pushing is if they shove this down our throats, and it looks like they're going to, and if our legislators who have been holding the line are getting threatened with their primary campaigns and all kinds of things. The financial and the academic accountability is what has also really got me upset. Public schools have so many reports and so many auditing systems. And we have if you look on the TEA website and start looking at some of the resources available for reporting funding, it is just amazingly complex and lengthy. Yet for these education spending accounts, there's almost nothing to track what these people would spend this money on. And I think a principle we can stand by is if you get taxpayer money, we want accountability, how that money is being spent, every dollar. People need to show how they're spending it.
Accountability and
For-
transparency.
Yes.
Okay.
The other thing is the achievement, that we have 20 more tests that we test public school students with. Private schools and homeschooling have virtually zero. I have looked into the private schools and homeschooling on the TEA website. I invite you to do that. Just do a search on the TEA website for homeschooling or private schools. It's an eye opener.
Okay, Debbie, you said we have 24 tests?
No, you'll see on the back of this sheet, it's 20 plus.
To their,
Yes,
to their
because if
zero.
you're special ed or GT or you have some special program you're going for, you've got more tests than that.
Yeah.
Look at all the tests that public school students have. And by the way, one of the studies that showed there was substantial learning loss, I mean substantial, like Hurricane Katrina pandemic learning loss, is to put a kid on vouchers. And then they come back to the public school and they get tested again. And it's found that they have had a year or more, a year and a half average learning loss in that time. So they've forgotten what they learned before in public school. They apparently didn't accomplish much the year they had the vouchers, and then somebody cares enough to put them in a public school, and they can, at that time, actually document the learning loss. All right.
Add to one of your statistics on SB2, the cap, no more than 20% of available positions for students who have a disability.
Yes.
That was another piece.
Thank you for adding that one. And it was originally sold as this is for special ed kids who can't get the services they need in a public school, and only 20% can do that. If you'll go to your sheet that looks like this, this is me just brainstorming, and I just feel that I want to give our children a fair break. Is what fairness is. I have an absolute basic emotional reaction that this needs to be fair to our children in Texas. I'm a mother, grandmother, and hopefully gonna live to see great grandchildren too. And I want them to get a fair break. I want all the children in Spring ISD to get a fair break. I was at a theater show one time, and somebody asked me, do you have a child in the show? And I looked up and I said, they're all my children. That's the way I feel about Spring ISD children. And I don't think they're getting a fair break. I put down a few things that I want for our kids in Spring ISD. And when you look like a strong preparation for a successful life, one of the most interesting things was to me when you look at State Board of Educator Certification, SBEC, and look at their core principles, what they want for kids. It is an eye-opener, and you don't see anything like that for private schools or for homeschooling. Another thing is the teacher certification. If you have a homeschooler who's teaching algebra, do they even know algebra? How certified, how qualified, how educated is that homeschooling parent to teach those subjects? Do they even teach the subjects? Or are they teaching, let's go out and have a trampoline and you go and do your PE that way, and then we'll watch a video on TV. You know, we don't know what they're doing at home. And that is really worrisome. And it should worry every citizen of Texas that you're having students who are woefully unprepared for the future. Another thing is fair grades, but I brought that up, that if we think that the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills are so important for our students to learn, why aren't they important for private schools, and why aren't they important for homeschoolers? Safety. If you go into TEA and talk, just do a search of school safety, I mean, it's cybersecurity, it's infectious diseases, it's a bleeding kit to protect kids. It's pest management. What kind of pesticides are using in their environment? I think that if you have private schools and homeschoolers getting taxpayer money, they need to be inspected for all these safety factors. Home is sometimes not the safest place for a child. We've had child abuse training. If there's a child abuser, they may not want their kid to go to public school because they may tell the teacher what's happening to them. And this is a very concerning thing to me, that we should need inspections of the homes. Also, healthy place. Are they getting a healthy meal at home? Also, do they get air conditioning in the summer? Do they get heating in the winter? I don't know that. I can't take that for granted. So anyway, those are some of the things I wanted us to talk about. If you'll
Okay.
turn that over.
That was
to-
amazing.
I'm sorry, one more. Unregulated choice is a danger to Texas children. And this is where I compare public schools to private schools to homeschooling, okay? And I picked three things: teacher quality, school safety, and academic achievement. I hope that you can use some of this information to make up your own message. And we need to send it to the education committees in the Senate and the House, whether they're going to listen to you or not. And anybody who has actually held up vouchers in the House, we need to send them fan letters and thank them and tell them that we will support them in their primaries any way we can. So that is what I'd like to leave right there. And I did it in 15 minutes.
Okay.
this is great.
And I want to wrap up okay, so I've gotten excited, and I don't know if you all know, I was feverishly taking notes, because what I wanted to walk away with today was a call to action. And what I really wanted to do was a did you know card or something that would go out to everybody, that we could carry around, that we could share, and that people can glean from to create their own messaging, because that is a good point. They stop looking at those form letters. And then I wanted us to do a video. And I was thinking that it could be like 10 bullets, like they had to take 5. You know, maybe we focus on and find a little catchy phrase, 12 steps to successful education, or, whatever the number that we select, right? Do something really kind of catchy and hit in 2 to 3 minutes, 3 minutes or less, those points in a video that we blast everywhere, and then challenge our other school districts to join us in posting these videos everywhere where we hit those key points. And then they can take those key points and the did you know and create their own letters, right? And I think I really liked your point about targeting specific legislators. Target them with, thank you for your help and we will support you, and target them with, we will not support you because of the damage that you're causing our kids. So I really think a did you know and a video out everywhere would happen. I hit 13. I was trying to come up with how many points to include in the video, and you had so much, I was writing fast. And so what I kind of landed on was,
Before you
ahead.
continue, can we do that? That's one question, because I think we had brought this, there was a question we asked in the Community Engagement Committee, and I think
I believe
there's,
we can. The district can.
We can't, you can't.
but we can, okay.
We can.
I just wanted to make sure. And then I wanted to add to Dr. Jensen's
Oh my God, that was great.
information.
Mm-hmm.
2 things. When Kelly and I got in front of the parent group and we were talking about vouchers, it was a shock that these parents, as involved as they were, many of them still didn't understand how they worked. And 2, the other piece is the cost to the vouchers. So 8,000 seems to be the magic number right now.
We're getting 6,100.
Average cost for private schools is 10,000. And that doesn't include, you gotta take your own kid to school to and from. You gotta take your own kid, you gotta pay for all the special equipment for the sports, all the clubs. You have to pay for their lunch, their uniforms. There's a bunch of other costs involved that nobody is thinking about. And then most people just, they say 10,000, but I know some schools in the Woodlands, it's like $24,000 a year.
It is.
8,000 is not gonna do anything.
Subsidized. Who already had it.
You can already afford it.
Right. So what I hit was this first chart where you talked about state plus local for underfunded Texas school compared to US, how far we are. I think that's a really good bullet point. to state average. Number two was the Texas public school versus vouchers ESA, that second chart. So to me, those are two critical key points. The third one that I picked up on was the testing values, the volume, like we have 20 plus to their 0. Another one was number 4. Learning loss, right? That's not being addressed. That was really key, where she talked about Senate Bill 2 actually talking about no more than 20% disability. Another one, the fairness, give our kids a break. I think that's another key point we should hit in our talking points or our video. Staffing, certified versus qualified staffing, teachers, homeschool, that was another good point I think we could hit.
Can I clarify,
Uh-huh.
as you're going through, this is, the target audience is the community? You're saying
Community,
getting this out to the
this
community?
is getting the community informed and aware and letting our legislators know that. When they know we're out there informing our community, that's what I got to at the end where she said, let's target those that are supporting public education and say to them, thank you. Let the ones that aren't say, we don't appreciate it and here's why. And they will see that we're informing our community why, and we won't back you in your next election. And we're informing our community not to support you in your next election. So yeah, it's informing the community, which creates a challenge to their reelection. Okay, fair grades, the TEKS, to her point of why they're so important for us and not them. Safety, it's another key point to hit on that she mentioned. Healthy meals. How do we know, what is the difference there? They're not being inspected. Are they getting, to her point, are they getting PE in the winter? Unregulated choice. That's another, you had a whole page on that. That was really great. And then to your point, the 8,000 versus the 6,100 and what additional cost is not really being included in that. So those are just some of the key things. I think we could hit those with a sentence or two and crank out a 3-minute video. Educate, like you said, we had our very informed parents in that meeting that didn't know. And to me, that's a bigger threat. Educating the community is a bigger threat to our legislators than showing up at their door. That's
Right.
my thoughts.
President Durant, can I quickly add just 2 things? One is, I think that every one of our posts, whether it's in text or video or whatever,
Mhm.
I think maybe we could start it all the same way, like, did you know?
Mm-hmm. Did you know?
Did you know?
Did you know? Did you know? We
Okay.
need a did you
The
know?
other thing is, I don't know if you noticed on
Video.
Give Our Children in Texas a Fair Break, there was a red line down there. And I think hit these legislators who are supporting vouchers by whatever name they call it and say, okay, you want vouchers? Check the curriculum of somebody using a voucher.
Mhm.
Check who's doing the teaching. Test their students who have vouchers and check the learning environment. This is what I want. Bing, bing, bing. So this is that's our ask.
Right.
If you pass that, you need to do that.
So, we can do the did you knows, we can do the video, that cannot be done with any district resources. So I need to say that. I don't know if we have any PACs and if we could utilize resources through a PAC is something that we may want to explore.
Would Raise Your Hand Texas be able to help us do
Uh,
something like that?
Mm-hmm.
For sure, they have, there's a whole list of things.
They have
that
a lot of
will
stuff,
do
I know.
For
I get-
free, they'll do coffee chats with the Ministerial Alliance and, with the community. All of those things are free. That's just the services they provide. I was actually gonna mention that too. That was a recommendation, was to create a graphic on vouchers
Mm-hmm.
and the impacts, to send to the community. They can help with the text, how the texts go out and brand it with our district information. And then there's metrics that they can track with that as well. And also they offer board training as well, at like an advocacy one-on-one. So,
Yeah, and I also wanted to add that the school choice is really not a choice because all of these private schools and institutions, they get to choose who gets in. So it's really not choice.
It's another point to put in the video. Trustee Adams?
Two things. One, another thing to add to the litany of things that private schools don't do is they are not required to comply with IDEA.
Repeat that?
They are not required to comply with IDEA. So for the, fraction of special needs students that they do accept, they don't necessarily need to comply with
Their needs.
IEPs and all the things that we're required. We don't have to do ARD meetings or any of that stuff. So there's that. And then the other point was, to your point about difficulty coordinating with other districts, I think districts are going to places like Raise Your Hand Texas. I know A-Leaf is heavily involved with Raise Your Hand Texas, and I know that because I talked to Darlene Bro. And so to the extent that we're trying to coordinate with like regional folks here, Raise Your Hand Texas might be sort of our best way to make sure we're getting together with them.
Okay, so are we all looking at the graphic, and you said they offer support in getting a did you know kind of graphic out?
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm in contact with Natalia, the regional advocacy coordinator. So we met with her, and I know she's also reached out in terms of things she could do with our community, family and community engagement team as well.
What do you all think on the video? We like it?
Mhm.
I can tell you,
I think we
I've
need
done
a
adoption
barrage
for
of
years
things.
in my career, and I've actually studied and tracked what type of tools bring the greatest impact to a change in behavior. And videos that are no more than 2 minutes have a huge impact on people's thought processes and the change in their behavior and bringing awareness. They're critical. And another neat thing about them is if you're posting them out there in a social media environment, they got thousands and thousands of views, then you've got people who are about to have a campaign, or legislators saying, oh my goodness, this is growing.
Mhm.
This is growing. So, and another key point that I mentioned is it should start off, did you know that vouchers are also, and talk about the different things they're calling them, so.
Something else that I was going to share, Brian Hollybeck, he was, yeah, he's great. And I actually introduced him, he was there,
What's his last name?
Hollebeck.
Hollybeck.
Calabash.
He has a really good video on Facebook of him testifying for the education subcommittee on that.
Yes,
Powerful.
he's with
How many
Thrall,
views is it?
Thrall ISD.
For all ISD.
Yeah.
He's a board
He's a board
member for all
member.
ISD.
Videos.
He's
are-
a great guy, and we had a conversation this last time up in Dallas, and his approach to some of these legislators is he's creating personal relationships with these legislators that oppose the vouchers, and literally just bringing them to the football games, bringing them into the community to see what the public schools can actually do and what's missing from the school choice conversation, basically. And it's a hard task, but it's just an alternative way of thinking, outside of the box, what you can do to influence the legislators. And it was interesting. It was a very targeted but different approach to the conversation. So just wanted to share that.
So what would you all say our call to action is for our next steps to do immediately to get done next? Is there a session now?
Well, one, I would think it'd be developing a list of those legislators on either side, so we
Okay.
know who to target.
Oh, and definitely the rural Republicans.
So get our list together, our pro list and our con list.
For and against.
And then get that graphic, that did you know graphic done and convert it into, just would convert that graphic into a
Quick
quick
points.
little clip.
Mhm.
Quick little video.
It may be, well, to Carmen's point, we had state legislators out at Planet Ford for groundbreaking. And I haven't seen any of those legislators at a football game or, at any of our events. And so reaching out to the Valerie Swansons and the Charles Cunninghams and inviting them to come to a game might do something for us.
Okay. Anything else? Good? Great job, Dr. Johnson. And Trustee McDaniels today.
So will you do the who, what, when, how, and why? As far as like, when are we gonna start, like deliverables and a timeline on? Or do you wanna come back to that?
No, we don't have time to come back to it. What I was really thinking about doing is putting together the key points and letting you articulate them for us in a sentence. You know, what's gonna be a punch to get to those key points. Getting with raise your hand.
Going forward, do we need to exchange private email addresses and not use the district's resources at all?
Can
Kind of
everybody
use this, treat this like a campaign?
text Debbie your private email? And then we'll get our did you know key points, top 10 or top 12, whatever they turn out to be. Work and see if we can partner with raise your hand
She can provide some
to
samples.
get a quick graphic together
ones
that
I've
we
done
can
before.
start blasting out quickly. I want to explore with, and then that graphic can be converted into a video. You just turn it into a quick little video. So we would have all the language for the video in the actual graphic. And I want to explore the cost of getting that video done and how we get it done.
Is everybody signed up for the TASB legislative report? Does everybody get that?
Yeah, we get it.
Okay.
Yeah, we saw that yesterday, yeah. And then I'm gonna start seeing how we can get that done, so. Email addresses to, personal emails to Dr. Jensen. I'm gonna ask Dr. Jensen and governance to give us our top 10, 12, or 14. Did you know bullets? I'll work with you, Trustee McDaniel, in reaching out to get the graphics done if you need my help, once we get those bullet points, so we can try to turn it around in the next couple of days. And then converting that into a video. I'm gonna explore if we revamp our political action committees, if we can solicit support through them to get that video done. And maybe raise your hand, Houston has, they might have resources too for the video, so we need to explore how we're gonna turn that graphic into a video. Then we're gonna blast it, just blast it out. And they may be ignoring form letters, but I think community awareness is the key.
I will
Because to
say-
Dr. Jensen's point, I think they're gonna push it through anyway, right?
Mhm.
So what's gonna be really critical is we inform the community that here's
it
who
is.
voted, which way. So when you go to the polls,
Mhm.
we
Here's
don't
what
want
they
them
are.
backing off.
Here's what they are, and here's what they aren't.
That is the conversation I'm gonna
Thank you.
tell you to be very careful with. So that there's a big difference, and I'm not gonna get deep into the law here because we are in
No,
open
thank you,
session.
that's why we need you.
But there's a big difference between legislative advocacy and electioneering, right? So electioneering is when you are supporting or opposing something that is on a ballot, a measure on a ballot, or an individual on a ballot. And we definitely cannot do any of that. We cannot use district resources to do those things. And so as we have these conversations and we talk about making people aware with the intent of maybe don't vote for these individuals when they're back up for running, that's getting us into the electioneering side, and I would be very careful with
We
that.
don't want to do that.
One thing that I will do though, Monday and Tuesday are starting to fill up, but I'll make some time for it, is I'll push out a very quick primer to the board on what we can and can't do with legislative advocacy, because if we can utilize some resources potentially to do some of these things, that may be helpful in getting it out more quickly, depending on what kind of, capacity, like our comms team has. But there are certainly things we can do as a district on the advocacy side. And so I'll push that primer out, just so you know where.
No, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you stepping up, because I said I was gonna explore what we could do through the PAC or other ways, and because we do need to definitely
And those are
make
still
sure that we're
good
staying
resources.
within legal boundaries.
Yeah, those are definitely good resources to look into. But if there are things that we can potentially do as a district too, and I know our comms team and our superintendent have looked at some things as well. So we'll just make sure, it'll be a quick primer. As you get it, if you have questions, let me know, and we can dig kind of deeper into certain areas, or if there's a certain direction we want to go. But just based on the conversation here, I'll put together something and get it out to you guys early next week.
Thank you.
And
Early
yeah.
this week, I guess. It's
Thank
Saturday,
you.
Sunday.
And I was also gonna say, don't discount the mass emails, because I did have Representative Jarvis Johnson respond back, yeah.
Okay.
So some of them do pay attention to the mass emails.
Maybe that can even be like a link down at the bottom of the graphics.
Mhm.
You know, I had to scroll up on my Twitter and my Facebook page. You click it and it comes up, and you can put in your zip, and it shows you who you send it to, and you just click and it sends the letter off for you.
Mhm.
And Jarvis Johnson used to be engaged with us, and he has been a little silent. So especially if he responded, I mean, we've got Thursday football game and Friday football games that if we
Okay.
want, I have not seen him in a while. So
Right.
it would be good to bring him on board, and he is or had been a strong supporter.
And we've had strong support and conversations with Sophronia Thompson. I've talked with Charles Cunningham, Sheila Jackson Lee, Jarvis Johnson staff, all in the last 2 weeks. So, yeah, we need to keep reaching out.
I sure prefer to give positives to the people who seem to know about the threats of this kind of funding. And you notice I don't condemn anybody, because I can tell you there's times I've gotten threatening emails and it just shuts me down. I'll actually be following it along, and then I get a threat, and it's just, psst, that's it.
Right.
Let's not do that.
Right. We just want to bring awareness to the truth of the impact that it will have on our kids' education and their choices and opportunities. All right. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Madam President, I move we adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved by trustee Adams and seconded by trustee Correa to adjourn the meeting. Is there any additional discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. That's unanimous. The meeting now adjourns today at 11:10 a.m. Thank you.